No, it's actually
Mike's on.
Good evening and welcome to the Monday, July 19th, 2021 meeting of the Hillsborough Township Board of Education. In accordance with the state's Sunshine Law of New Jersey, adequate notice of this meeting of the Hillsborough Township Board of Education was provided on July 15th, 2021 to the Hillsborough Beacon and the Courier News. Mr. Mahmood, may we please have a roll call?
Surely. Mr. Gillette?
Here.
Mr. Kidd?
Here.
Mrs. Maroon?
Here.
I'm sorry, Mr. Marini. Well, we're good to go.
Ladies first.
Very good. Thank you. Mrs. Nurse?
Here.
Mr. Oliver? Here. Mr. Pulsifer?
Here.
Mrs. Stats?
Here.
And Mrs. Trujillo?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Mahmood. May we now please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag.
I'd like to acknowledge the correspondence received as listed in 4.1 and now turn it over to Dr. Antunes for the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Mrs. Trujillo. Okay. So I'd like to thank everybody who joined us this morning at Cafe Brio. We had a nice turnout there, 30 or so people, and then we had some more people this evening, about 25 or so, so I appreciate that. Thank you. And what we're talking about today is a continuation of what we talked about in June, and it's just, I just want to remind people, this is the latest information we have. In fact, we have something in this presentation that I didn't even talk about this morning, but I talked about this evening because it changed from my morning meeting this morning to this evening. So this is the information that we have at the time we have it, and it will likely change, but we're staying on top of it. So this slide might look familiar because I utilized the same slide in June. What are we doing for September? We're planning for a typical opening. We are planning for a full day opening, 5 days a week with lunches. And we're doing our best to maintain at least 3 feet. That won't always be possible, so we're going to do that to the greatest extent possible. I also want to point out that, you know, COVID has affected people in so many different ways, and it's very personal. And everybody has handled this situation. We're all going through it, and we all handle it different ways, whether it's up and down or it's a cycle, whatever the case may be. And it has split our world, our country, our state, our community, and in some cases, families are split with differing opinions about how to handle it, how to move forward. And so I'd like to put out there that we want to assume good intentions. We don't want to start with assuming bad intentions on everyone. We all want the same thing. We want to get back to as normalcy as much as possible. We certainly want children in school. Teachers want to be in school, students want to be in school, and we want them there. So we want the same outcome, have students in school every day, all day, as long as health and safety are at the forefront of what we do. So I had shared in June that we've got several steps to moving forward, including forming a core committee, forming grade band committees, and then some spring into summer events. And we have continued to do all those things, and we will continue to do those things. We're working off of guidance that we received from the Department of Ed, which is called the Road Forward, which came out in June. This guidance that came out in June outlines expectations for the fall. And even in the guidance, it indicates that it's likely to change, as well as guidance that we received on July 9th from the CDC. In the interim, Mr. Mahmood and I spoke with Dr. Mandelbaum, our district physician, several times, and I've invited him to be here. He couldn't be here this evening, but he is going to come to one of our meetings. There are some key takeaways from the CDC that they put out there. I want to highlight a couple of them. I'm not going to read them all to you. This will be available online. But some of the key takeaways are that obviously safely returning to in-person instruction in the fall is a priority for everybody. And according to the experts, vaccination is currently the leading public health prevention strategy to end COVID-19. They indicate that schools do maintain at least 3 feet of physical distance between students with classrooms combined with indoor mask wearing by people who are not fully vaccinated to reduce the transmission risk. And when it's not possible to maintain physical distance of 3 feet, such as when schools can't reopen if we do, then we need to layer multiple prevention strategies, which we're going to talk about a little bit. Many of the things that we've instituted throughout this process are going to continue to stay in place. And so I want to just affirm that for everybody. And then, of course, we just talked about the layered prevention strategies. So layered prevention strategies, we're going to talk about that a little bit more. We're going to be monitoring levels of community transmission and vaccination coverage from the Department of Health. If we stabilize in the low range, we will remove some of the layered strategies. We'll consider removing them one by one. And conversely, if we continue to increase in the moderate or higher range, then we may have to implement additional restrictions. Now, some of these restrictions, probably most of them, will not be restrictions that we have any control over. It'll probably be directives from the Department of Ed or the state or the local health department. So we want to remember that schools have mixed population of vaccinated and unvaccinated people, whether it be students or staff. Obviously, we know that our elementary schools house students who are not eligible for the vaccine at the moment. And Auten Road, the middle school and the high school, well, Auten Road and middle school probably has a combination. Some students who are eligible for vaccination and some students who are not. And the high school also has students who may not be vaccinated despite being eligible to be vaccinated for any number of reasons. So we just want to keep that in mind. The premise that we're going from is that those who attend school are healthy and well and are following the guidelines and criteria set forth, that everyone will cooperate and comply with contact tracing as necessary and appropriate, and that any decision-making regarding COVID-19 prevention strategies are based upon protecting those who are not fully vaccinated. Backup plans are essential. It's very possible that if the transmission rate continues to rise, especially in those ages where vaccination is, where students are not eligible for vaccination, it may be that we're going to have to change. We might have to close a class, we might have to close a school, we might have to close a program. So we need to be able to do that very quickly. Sometimes we will get notified from a parent at like 10 o'clock at night that I just got my child just got his or her positive test results back, we need to do something for the morning. So it's likely that we may reach out to members of the class or a bus stop or a program late into the evening so that we don't have everybody entering school in the morning. So backup plans are essential, especially for children, for parents of children who are young and can't be home alone. So the big question is masks. Do we wear them? Do we not wear them? Where are we on this? So there is updated guidance expected prior to the fall. We've been very vocal. When I say we, I'd say school district, boards of education, superintendents throughout the county and the state have been vocal that we need this information sooner rather than later. A week before school starts is not helpful as we try to move forward with planning. But I do suspect that things will change right up until the first day of school. Right now, masks must be worn on school buses. That's actually, masks must be worn on all public transportation, and school buses are considered public transportation. School districts are also allowed to have stricter regulations. One of the things that does go a little bit above and beyond is my recommendation is that masks be worn in hallways while changing classes, mostly from Auten Road and up. If you've ever been in our schools during changing classes, it's sort of like being in New York City during the holidays where it's very, very close together. Now, people would not be considered a close contact at that time because the CDC defines close contact as being within 6 feet for 15 minutes. But it is a very tight space, and as many emails as I get from community members saying, please don't make my children wear masks, is the same amount as I get, please, I implore you to make everybody wear a mask. So we're really trying to balance all of these issues. So that was a recommendation that I'm making. No decisions have been made about this because we do have a core committee, but that's something I'm making. The other thing that came up was, right now, if we're in low, we're saying masks are optional regardless of vaccination status. If we can remain and sustain low for a period of time, and after discussions with the district's physician and the local Department of Health, we're going to make masks optional regardless of vaccination status. Everything I'm saying is as of today, as of right now. If we're in moderate or higher, the recommendation was that masks are optional only if proof of vaccination is provided. So you may ask, are we mandating proof of vaccination? We are not currently mandating proof of vaccination. However, parents have already shared with, whether it's the school nurse or the coach or the teacher, some vaccination status. We are not mandating that at this time. That may be taken out of our hands at some point, but at this time we're not mandating that. You'll see as we go on that if you are vaccinated, there'll be some other things that you won't have to do, but this is where we are right now. So if we're moderate or higher, masks will be required for any unvaccinated individual. Now, this is what changed from when I had my meeting this morning to when I came back to the office and put the finishing touches on this presentation. And that is that the American Academy of Pediatrics, actually this was put out yesterday, but we received an alert this afternoon. And I did share this morning and this evening that we receive information on an ongoing basis, and it, as I said, it may be taken out of our hands, and this actually may be the first step in moving toward doing so, but it hasn't been done so yet. And what the American Academy of Pediatrics is indicating is that certainly all eligible individuals should receive the COVID-19 vaccine. It's a personal decision. This is simply the recommendation. And also, all students older than 2 years and all school staff should wear face masks at school unless medical or developmental conditions prohibit the use. And then they outline 4 or 5 reasons as why they're saying that. I want to be clear. I'm not recommending this at this time. I'm simply providing the information that's there. So I indicated earlier that masks are required on buses and in hallways during passing time, regardless of vaccination status, and that mask guidelines are subject to change. But right now, if you are vaccinated, there's no masking required according to the guidelines that are out there. If you're exposed, there's no quarantine required. You still will be able to participate in extracurricular and athletic activities, and you do not have to complete the daily COVID screening form if we have proof of vaccination. If you're unvaccinated or choose not to provide proof of vaccination, then masking is required in moderate or higher levels. And if you are exposed, you do have to quarantine. Now, the quarantine period may be different based upon whether you're symptomatic, asymptomatic, and a host of other issues. But if you are exposed and you're unvaccinated, you do have to quarantine, and your participation in extracurricular or athletic activities is not permitted. And you are required to complete the daily COVID screening form. In terms of food services, the CDC did indicate that students, teachers, and staff who are fully vaccinated do not need to distance while eating, much like if you go to a restaurant. However, due to the constraints and nuances of each facility, the logistics are being worked out. Each school just is a little bit different about how the lunches will be served in the schools. And the building level administrators will communicate that to staff and students as we get closer to school. As I said, the building administrators are working on it, and they will continue to do so. But our plan is to maximize the physical distance as much as possible, and to utilize any additional spaces outside of the cafeteria for mealtime seating to help facilitate as much distancing as we can. That could mean different things in different buildings. In terms of recess and phys ed, they say that in general, people do not need to wear masks when outdoors, when they're playing outside, when they're doing phys ed activities, or during recess, outdoor recess. However, those who are not fully vaccinated are encouraged to wear a mask, especially in crowded settings, even if it's outdoors. And if there are any activities that involve sustained close contact with others who are not fully vaccinated, they're encouraged to wear a mask. When phys ed activities are held indoors, it's important for people who are not vaccinated to wear masks and maximize distance. Now, the teachers are all aware of this, and they'll do their work to ensure that everybody is as safe as possible. In terms of athletics and extracurricular activities, they do indicate that people who are fully vaccinated no longer need to wear a mask or physically distance in any setting while participating in sports and extracurriculars. Again, I want to stress that as long as we see proof of vaccination, if, this is what I said earlier, people who are vaccinated can refrain from quarantine following a known exposure if asymptomatic and can continue to be in the sport or the extracurricular activity. Now, some sports are riskier than others because there's close contact sports. And so that could also happen with band, choir, theater, things like that. So you want to think about that. We all want to just sort of have that in our mind. And if students do have any symptoms of COVID, even if it might not be COVID, but we don't know, and if you don't know, then we want to refrain from these activities. Students who are not fully vaccinated and participate in indoor sports and other high-risk activities should continue to wear masks and keep physical distance as much as possible. Again, all of these are guidelines from the CDC. They are online, and I did include the link if anybody wanted to go to that. So coaches and administrators are considering specific sports-related risks for those who are not vaccinated. So the setting of the sporting event, how close the event is, the number of people, the level of intensity, the duration of time, and obviously the presence of more people more likely to develop the illness. We are going to have additional community outreach events, so be on the lookout for those. We definitely have one scheduled. I believe the next board meeting is August 19th. Is that
Yes,
correct?
I think so.
Okay, so we definitely have one scheduled for that, but we're scheduling others as well. And that's that. Oh, I'm sorry, August 23rd is the board meeting. Thank you, Mrs. Scott. Oh, maybe, okay, so August 23rd is the board meeting. I think August 19th, we're hopefully going to another community cafe. So we'll keep everybody posted on that. So I know I went through quickly, but I'm happy to speak with anybody at any time offline, and we continue to meet. We continue to speak with our administrative team. Our administrators are forming teams in their buildings made up of teachers and parents and community members. Our attempt to go out to the community or to have events like we did before this meeting and this morning is our attempt to garner other information. Most of this information, most of it actually, the great majority of it, are all recommendations either from the CDC, and then we speak with our district physician and our local Department of Health. So as we get more information, we'll continue to share that with everybody. Thank you, Mrs. Trina.
Thank you, Dr. Antunes. And I wanted to also thank Dr. Antunes again for hosting the two events before the board meeting today, and also to thank Mr. Marini and Ms. Stats for joining Dr. Antunes and myself at Cafe Brio. And then earlier tonight, Mrs. Nurse, Ms. Maroon, and Mr. Marini, and, me. And thank you to Ms. Stats and Mr. Kidd for deferring their seats to the other board members. We appreciate that. Next, I would like to move on to committee reports, and if Mr. Gillette would give the Operations Committee meeting.
Thank you very much. Operations Committee met on Thursday, July 15th. We had a number of items on the agenda. First up was new IEP software. We had Dr. Radwan come in to speak to us about the necessity for having a modern IEP software, and that's the best way I can characterize it after listening to her for about 15 minutes, speak about the inadequacies of the current software that they're using. Does not provide the service to families, and it's not making it easy to work for her employees either. So we had our purchaser, Ms. Schwab, come in to talk about how they looked at various software and how they chose one, and the committee was unanimous in supporting the decision to purchase that software. We have a couple of informational items on the agenda. We had a very thorough referendum update from Mr. DeLuca. All work is proceeding at all the schools. I won't go through every one individually, but know that it's proceeding well. Especially Amsterdam, looks like every project is going to be done timely. So that's one out of 9 is going to be completely done. The paving projects at Sunnymead that you might be thinking of, that's going to be finished before the start of the school year. Paving at Hillsborough Elementary School will be done. Much air conditioning will be done. Maybe not 100%, maybe not 90%. We did talk about the number 90%, and we didn't want to say 90%, so I'm not going to say 90%, but approaching 90% maybe of the project. So things look very good at the schools right now. Some projects that will not be done this summer will be the security vestibules at the schools. Those projects will not be started this summer. That will be next summer. But everything else is progressing. We talked briefly about a personnel matter that relates to operations. Then we talked about a new policy to bring transparency into athletic booster clubs and other outside organizations that work very closely with our schools. We're looking for to provide some transparency to parents and the community about how these organizations work, since they're so closely tied to our schools. And we do not have a policy in our district about to recognize organizations that we want our staff and especially coaches in the area booster clubs to work with, and many schools do. We looked at a boilerplate policy, and that's still in progress. Dr. Antunes and Mr. Mood spoke briefly about the final closeout of the cyber attack that took place last year. We're having a completely normal, federally mandated procurement audit of the food service department. This is something that happens every once in a while. That should be easy to do. We talked about the status of the high school dance team and how it fits in with the other, whether it's a sport, a club, how it fits in. It looks like what we came up to is that it's a club. We like to support the club in some way, but it's still a club like many others, like robotics club and other clubs that do significant fundraising and on their own. So we're going to see how we can approach having the dance team elevated to those other clubs with stipends for coaches and things. So this is in the works for the future, not for immediately now. On tonight's agenda, you'll see some transportation routes for next year. Also, as is usually the case, and this happens several times over the years, a few routes that were automatically renewed were never officially adopted by our board as renewed from the year that just ended last month. So those have to be adopted tonight, just for bookkeeping purposes. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gillette. Ms. Maroon with the Education Committee report. Thank you.
Sure. The Education Committee met on Wednesday, July 14th. It was one of the lesser amounts of the agendas that I've ever seen in education. But the first thing we talked about was the book adoption that you see on tonight's agenda, the 2 textbooks, Environmental Science for AP and Physics for the high school. We also discussed the cyber attack closeouts. I think in every committee that was discussed. We talked about the possible shared service that you'll see today on the agenda for today with the YMCA for a summer program for second graders going into third grade. And the info will be forthcoming for that. And we also had a discussion, just preliminary, and we just started to have a conversation about school start times. And that was pretty much all.
Thank you, Ms. Maroon. And Ms. Stats with the Communications Committee report and Municipal Alliance update. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Trio. Communications Committee met on July 14th. Dr. Antunes reviewed some of the results of the March 15th staff climate survey, especially the questions that were related to the board. This was a survey that was prepared by Dr. Feltry and HEA leadership. And we will eventually, hopefully we will get the results of the entire survey. Then Dr. Antunes shared that they have been looking for a vendor to conduct a climate survey throughout the entire community because we are interested in the results of what that would inform us about regarding so many issues. And as has been shared with other committees, Dr. Antunes updated our committee with what happened with cybersecurity and the improvements thereof. And we also discussed the outreach opportunities, community outreach opportunities, as has already happened today, and future opportunities, possible Q&A at the next board meeting in August, and possibly other ones as well. And as has been stated, the board participation in those. And also maybe participating in Hillsborough's 250th anniversary parade on September 18th. So that was communications. The Municipal Alliance met on July 9th. There were concerns shared about how students have been coping, especially when we see how adults have been coping and resorting to substance abuse. And there will be a pride survey addressing various issues such as substance abuse with our students in September. And there's a flyer that's over on the table on the side there about Bridge to Success, which is a program intended for young adults aged 18 to 24 years old. This will take place September 21st through November 9th. Once a week, they're virtual and free, and that's where young adults can learn various stress management strategies and problem-solving strategies. So we encourage people to pre-register for that. There's a QR code on the flyer over there. And that's it. Thank you, Ms. Trio.
Thank you, Ms. Stats. And I also would like to take this opportunity to thank Dr. Antunes and the administrative staff for adjusting the schedule of the committee meetings to precede, as much as possible, our board meetings, as some board members had suggested, so thank you very much. Then moving along, we now have the approval of the public minutes, and so that would be for the June 23rd public minutes, which were from our board goal-setting meeting. May I have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Pulsifer.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Marini. Any discussion, corrections? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Motion passes.
Thank you, Mr. Mahmood. Then we next have a motion to approve the executive session minutes from June 28th. May I have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Kidd.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Maroon. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Motion passes.
Thank you, Mr. Mahmood. Then finally, we have the motion to approve public minutes from June 28th. May I have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Pulsifer.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Kidd. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Motion passes.
Thank you, Mr. Mahmood. Next, we have comments from the board and the public. I would like to open it up to the board first for any comments on the public agenda tonight. Then I will then move it to the public. So I will read the notice. We very much welcome input from the public. During board meetings, there will be 2 30-minute periods of time that the meeting will be open for public comments where members of the public are invited to comment, which they may do so in person. During the first public comment period, members of the public may comment about items that are listed on tonight's agenda before the board votes. If time remains in this public comment period, members of the public may comment on any school or school district issue that a member of the public feels may be of concern to the residents of the school district as per bylaw 167. Before you state your question or comment, you will be asked to provide your name and address. Please understand that our public forums are not structured as question and answer sessions, but rather are offered as opportunities to share your thoughts with the board. In instances where the board believes there is a misunderstanding or inaccuracy, the board president or superintendent will address the comment. There may be times when a member of the public makes a comment or asks a question about personnel or hiring decisions. Kindly note that the Open Public Meetings Act and the privacy rights of public employees encompassed therein do not permit the board to discuss personal issues in public session.
Good evening. There we go. Good evening. Henry Goodhue, Hillsborough Education Association. I just had a quick question regarding, I believe it's item 11.5, which is the new IEP software. In years past, as a special education teacher myself, I sat on committees where we reviewed the software prior to it being purchased. And I was just curious, I know that it's not a Q&A, but if any information could be shared on this software and how it was selected and the staff involvement in that prior to, if it was similar to years past.
We will perhaps answer at the end of public comment, Mr. Goodhue.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Is there any other comment from the public? Seeing none, then I will close public comment. And Dr. Antunes or Mr. Mahmood? Sorry.
All right, go ahead, Mr. Mahmood.
So, I think, Mr. Goodhue, thank you for the question. I believe that Dr. Radwan and her staff had actually looked at the software. They reached out to a couple of neighboring districts that also use it. I don't know that she actually went through it with any of the staff members, so I don't have an answer to that specific question. But I can tell you that the current software that we're using is completely, it's really kind of one of the not so famous, and it's really hard to work with. So the one that we selected via competitive contract seems to be sort of the best that's in the market, according to the research that we did. And she's very confident in the work. And we also have an integration with that software because we use that software for other purposes in the district. So we think it's going to be very beneficial. And I will talk to Dr. Wagwan about sort of the staff interaction, but I think from an administrative perspective, I felt that, or at least Joel felt on the technology side, the fiscal side, that it was one of the better softwares that's out there. So we're hoping that the efficiencies will be realized by the board and that it's the state-of-the-art IEP software. But I will follow up on that.
Thank you, Mr. Mahmood. Any comments from the board? Ms. Nurse.
I do. I guess I would just be under the assumption that staff would be involved in a process such as this, since they're the ones that are going to be working on that. I'm not sure what the time frame is and if this vote can be moved until we find out if staff had any involvement at all in that, because I would hate to spend over $100,000 and find out later that staff found that it didn't meet their needs.
If we delay this vote, we only had 60 days to award it. The board would have to start from scratch. So we would have to go through the solicitation of bids, purchasing would get involved, special services, just letting the board know. So if we do delay it today, we would spend the money to advertise and go out to bid again. We would probably spend more money doing that. I recommend that the board approve the awarding of the competitive contract, and certainly I think we can fill that gap with teachers and staff. I believe Dr. Radwan, and I don't have the answer, but I'm sure that there was some interaction. I just don't have that fact in front of me. But I would find it hard to believe that the administrator of special services did not talk to staff members about it. I'm sure she did. I just don't have the facts.
Mr. Gillette.
Yeah, so I'll address something about the cost. Well, first of all, I'll address that. They looked at two different pieces of software, which usefully, technically, were nearly identical. They both provided tremendous function above what they have now, and they were pretty much tied, technically. This one came out to be a little less expensive. That's what the deciding line came to on the competitive contract. Is that what it is?
Yes.
Yeah, competitive contract. So the $100,000 cost includes some upfront costs, which if I recall was something like $22,000, something like that, plus the first 3 years of the software. Now, we pay something for the software we have now, so it's not a completely new cost. We would not be paying for the other one. She also shared with us, Dr. Rodwan also shared with us that on the software they use now, because laws change, even nomenclature changes in the law, and every time they needed to make a change to the software, they could not do it themselves. They had to have that done by the company, and it was at a tremendous cost. Some of these were thousands of dollars to change the software. This is not like that. This has the functionality of being able to evolve all of the time with our needs, with changing words, how things are phrased, with changing laws, whatever. So these were some of the benefits. So as far as cost goes, I don't know, it's not going to be any more expensive, I don't think, in the long run with those other things taken out. So just
Thank you,
the cost.
Thank you, Mr. Gillette. Mr. Pulsifer?
Just a quick question, if I could. Is something like this software something that we would have to award the contract to the lowest qualified bidder, or is there room for discussion as to what people think is a better solution, even if it might be more expensive? How does this one work?
So for competitive, good question, Mr. Pulsifer. I'll be nice, I won't, as I did a couple years ago. But good question. That competitive contract, the way we did this one, is we'd have to schedule out sort of how we'd rank the software, and it wouldn't be lowest responsible. It would be, in this case, the evaluative committee that would determine what, based on the grading structure that we created as a committee, and then we'd rate those vendors. So price wouldn't drive the entire awarding of the bid. They would have to have all the other qualifications, but it wouldn't be lowest responsible through a competitive contract. And when we consulted about why we do it this way, for software, we didn't want to do lowest responsible. We felt that we wanted to see the software, sort of take a look at it and evaluate it, and that's what we did with this.
I appreciate that. I think this is something certainly that's different than evaluating bus route bids and things like that, that this is something that requires a little more thought to evaluating which is a better product, regardless of cost.
Can I add?
Yes.
As I recall, Chris, it was like a 100-point system, and there were 3 categories, 2 categories of 30, 30, and 1 category of 40, I believe. And in the first 2 categories, software tied. They each got the same score, and in the price, one was better. But it could have come up anyway. It doesn't have to be on price. Was only one component, like 1/3 of it.
Okay.
And the others.
Thank you.
Ms. Nurse?
Mr. Mahmood, in terms of the evaluative committee, were there any staff, which staff was on the evaluative committee?
So it's listed on there. There was, when we put I think we either put it in the communicator or it's in the attachment.
It's in the attachment, but I
In this document?
It's right there.
Which one did I click on? I've got it right here.
So I think someone needs to say who they were.
I don't have that in front
So
of
so the public will know.
I can say it.
It was also listed on the website, I believe?
Yeah,
That was
because-
noticed on the public website also.
Was it on the public?
It's actually, if you look on the actually https.us, the front page right above the board meeting, it actually,
Oh, okay, it's not on the agenda on the public agenda.
It's not on the agenda as an attachment? I thought it was. I apologize.
Executive attack.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
I am going to, I don't know if this is the time, I'm sorry if it's not the time, but can 11.5 be separated when it's time to vote?
sure.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments from the board? Oh, Dr. Antunes.
Correct me if I'm wrong, it's vague, but is it also true that there's very few systems out there to even choose from? Okay, this is that system. Okay, I wasn't sure. That's why I was hesitant to say that. So there was so few to choose from that it may have even just been between those 2.
I think so.
Okay, so let's confirm that too, but I'm pretty sure that's what I recall Dr. Redwan saying. Okay, thank you.
Okay, seeing no further comments in the public. Oh, Mr. Kidd.
I was just proposing, especially going into this coming year, that may or may not be difficult. We will come to see. At what point will training be, is the difference in user interface of these softwares strong enough that usage training needs to be required, or is it already routine for usage training for all types of software to be required whenever there's a change?
Yeah, I'm assuming, thank you, Mr. Kidd. I'm assuming that as Mr. Gillette said, part of the cost was the training component and sort of bringing that out, and then it's the rollout, and then the actual use of the software. So part of the cost that the board's paying for is the training aspect.
I may not have mentioned the training in my explanation,
But it
but
was
yes,
in that
it was part of it.
22,000.
Okay, so Ms. Nurse, it's 11.5 that you were referring to separate out?
Yes, it
Okay.
is. Thank you.
Okay. All right, thank you very much. Seeing no further comment from the board, then Dr. Antunes for the action agenda.
Thank you. The superintendent recommends that the Board of Education approve the education agenda as follows: 9.1 through 9.6, motion to approve curriculum writing, motion to approve the new textbooks as listed, motion to approve staff for ELL summer program, motion to accept the FY22 Teach STEM Classes in Non-Public Schools grant, motion to submit the statement of assurance for the FY22 Teach STEM Classes in Non-Public Schools grant award, and motion to approve the affiliation agreement with Rowan University.
Thank you, Dr. Antunes. May I have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Maroon.
Second?
Thank you, Mr. Pulsifer. Any discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Mahmood, if we could have a roll call, please?
Surely. Mr. Gillette?
Yes.
Mr. Kidd?
Yes.
Mr. Marini?
Yes.
Mrs. Maroon?
Yes.
Mrs. Nurse?
Yes.
Mr. Oliver? Yes. Mr. Pulsifer?
Yes.
Mrs. Stats?
Yes.
And Ms. Trujillo?
Yes.
Motion passes.
The superintendent recommends that the Board of Education approve the human resources agenda as follows: 10.1 to 10.11, motion to approve the resolution as listed, motion to approve resignations, motion to approve the transfer, change, and assignment, motion to approve the revised leaves of absence, motion to approve leaves of absence, motion to affirm appointments for the 2021-2022 school year, motion to approve the summer work, motion to approve extended school year program staff, motion to approve fall coaches 2021 to 2022, motion to approve extra coverage, and motion to approve student teachers and doctoral interns as listed.
Thank you, Dr. Antunes. May I have a motion and a second?
Can I ask to have 10.9 pulled separately?
Sure. So can I have a motion and a second for 10.1 to 10.11, excluding 10.9?
So moved?
Thank you, Mr. Pulsifer.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Kidd. Any discussion on 10.1 through 10.11, excluding 10.9? Okay, seeing none, Mr. Mahmood, if we could have a roll call, please?
Surely. Mr. Gillette?
Yes.
Mr. Kidd?
Yes.
Mr. Marini?
Yes.
Mrs. Maroon?
Yes.
Mrs. Nurse?
Yes.
Mr. Oliver?
Yes.
Mr. Pulsifer?
Yes.
Mrs. Stats?
Yes.
And Mrs. Trujillo?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Mr. Mahmood. May we now have a motion and a second for 10.9?
Can I just make a comment on 10.9?
Yeah.
No, first a motion and then a second.
So moved.
Thank you, Ms.
Second.
Maroon. Thank you, Mr. Pulsifer. Any comments, Mr. Oliver?
So I'm a little concerned with the coaches and the appointments for a couple of reasons, and I have a couple of questions. Number one, the HR committee did not meet, so we didn't have a chance to discuss this. I started discussions on coaches back in probably March and had some concerns from correspondence from some parents about some of the programs that were being run. I do want to reiterate by saying, you know, we have a lot of good coaches and we have a lot of good programs, but we can be better. And my first and foremost question is, we talked about revising the review process of coaches. To my knowledge, I don't think we've really done much with that. I'd like to see some additional points. Again, COVID hits everybody, we get behind, things get pushed to the back burner. So that's number one. I haven't really seen some revisions to how we evaluate coaches, and how the hiring process goes out to solicit new coaches. Number two, we recently appointed a new principal, which the majority of these coaches fall under the high school. Has the new principal been given an opportunity to review the coaches' performances, the different sports, to give her input on it. I'm looking for an answer.
I think,
Michael, or?
I'm sorry, Mr. Oliver. At this time, I know that I can't say with 100% certainty, but I believe, and we can confirm this, that Mr. Davis and Mrs. Fisher has spoken, but honestly, she's been there a very short
short period of
time.
time.
So I wouldn't want to say that she's had the opportunity to really delve deep into that.
So, based on those facts, I'm going to ask the board to defer this to the next board meeting. I
So,
think
Mr.
we need to get some additional information before I can make a decision on this.
So, Mr. Oliver, just so you know that the next board meeting, thank you, Ms. Stats, is August 23rd, which is after the fall sports tryouts and practices begin. So, Ms. Marin?
No, I was just going to say that I disagree. I think we have to get this going because the student athletes need to start as soon as possible.
Thank you, Ms. Marin. Mr. Gillette?
Yeah, thank you. So for a few years now, when this topic has come up about appointing coaches, I've asked why we don't have secure start dates and end dates for the appointments. And I don't care when they are. They can be, I asked Dr. Tunis today for some start dates, and she said, cheer and football and tennis begin on August 9th. Everything else begins August 16th, and middle school begins September 8th. I don't know where those dates are derived from. Are they derived from the NJSIAA start dates?
Yeah.
Well, wouldn't we want our coaches to be already working before the NJSIAA start date? I'd like to see this is, and I mean, I don't care when they are, but why would you appoint a coach for August 9th, the start date? Why wouldn't you put the coach before that? And also the end dates is around November 12th. That seems to be too early to end the appointment. The appointment should go, I mean, I know they have many sports have end-of-the-year awards or banquets or something. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because I think it shows a lack of care about this appointment. We have lots of appointments and things in our packets every 2 weeks, however often we meet. And they always have an effective date of the start. I just saw an attachment with a list of fall coaches. I don't know when the start date is. I don't know when the end date is. So, I mean, I think it's just a lack of care. So I'm with John on this. No, I mean, obviously we have to prove it tonight, but my sentiments are with John. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gillette. Mr. Marini?
Thank you. I brought this up a couple times. I've only been on the board since January, but I know we had a bunch of issues that came up that required affirmative votes because it was too late to defer them. I kind of echo Greg's comments a little bit in this, and the fact that it puts us in a bad situation to say, oh, if we vote no, then we might not have a coach to start the school year. So this, and I think I brought this up, the idea of a calendar to have things when we need to do stuff. So prom, we need to know we need to have by this date to do prom. We need to have this date for coaches. We need to this. So we should know a month and a half, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months out, we have a coach appointment coming up, and everybody needs to be informed and understood the process before we get to a vote where it's, if you vote no, we might not have a coach to start the school year. So I think I'll echo Greg's words of irresponsible, I guess. I don't know if the word you used or not, but that's my word. Irresponsible. No, I think it's an irresponsible thing to show up at a meeting and say you have to vote or we won't have coaches to start the year. It's unfair to the students and the Board of Ed as well.
Thank you, Ms. Marini. Ms. Stats?
I don't recall the exact date, but I do think there is supposed to be a considerably sooner date that approval of coaching assignments, say, for the fall season are made. Certainly not at this time. I don't know if anybody can refresh my memory on that, but I do think it's supposed to be earlier than now, for the exact same reasons you're saying, where, it's like there's, can't come up with a good metaphor right now, or appropriate metaphor, but we're forced to approve this because it's either that or we hurt the kids. And that's not a fair situation for anybody to be in. So if I'm wrong that there isn't an earlier approval date for the fall coaches, then we should make an earlier one.
Thank you, Ms. Stats. Ms. Marin?
Yeah, I was thinking, I think it has in years past been earlier. I think just this year it's been pushed back. I don't know, I can't explain why, but I mean, I would assume maybe COVID, but I agree. I think that the coaching staff should be approved much earlier. But that doesn't change, my vote. I think, that the coaches do an excellent job, and I want them to continue to do an excellent job. And the coaches' responsibilities start well before the season starts. I'm sure they're already have their captain's practices and their trainings and everything going on, as I'm sure coaches continue to do. So I do think that the date may need to be moved up to approve all coaches, even winter and spring, because I think the winter coaches are probably doing their camps and running things already. So, but I think that's just something this year that has been different. I do believe that we voted a lot earlier, I think, on the coaches typically.
Thank you, Ms. Maroon. Mr. Oliver, and then Ms. Stats.
Just, again, just to echo, and I'm going to maybe pick at a scab, I know Mr. Gillette has brought this up in the past. There's a policy that the board is supposed to be aware of plans for graduation, but in my short tenure on the board, that's never happened. And I'll defer to more senior members, senior on the board, not in age, because I think I have everybody beat there. But this seems to be a growing concern. In my short time on the board, appointments for coaches have always been through the HR committee, which I was on, that Mr. Pulsifer chaired. This didn't happen in this particular case. And I feel that I'm forced to vote no on this because no one's listening. There seems to be an ongoing theme that we're playing catch up and we're being forced to vote on things too late. And the stakeholders are right out there, the parents, the students, and the coaches. But until we get a better handle on this, I'm being forced to vote yes for all the wrong reasons. And I'm not going to do it anymore.
Thank you, Mr. Oliver, and Ms. Stats.
I understand Mr. Oliver's frustration, but I think a lot of it's about the process, and we need to improve the process maybe, and abide by what the process should be. And I also want to emphasize that our coaches are amazing. I mean, I think somebody figured out, this was several years ago, but probably isn't too much off the mark now. Their hourly pay is like $1 an hour or something about that. So they definitely put in the time, and they maybe even cents, right? But I do think I worry about judging anyone, including coaches, based on anecdotal or evidence or hearsay. Because coaching is a tough job, and, like, I'll be sitting in the stands at a basketball game or a football game, and it's amazing what people yell, whether it's about the coaches or to the coaches from that distance, or even the students. It's amazing what the coaches have to put up with, and in spite of that, I think they are good at not only guiding their students, their players to achieve excellence in whatever particular sport they're engaging in, but also, achieving good sportsmanship and making sure they're keeping up with their academics.
Thank you, Ms. Stats. Ms. Maroon.
Yeah, and I also want to throw in a little, I think as a board, we see, more or less the bad emails. We don't get to see the good emails. And I think that's a shame, because I think there are many good emails that come through, and they're probably going to the coach and to other means. They're not coming to the board. And I think when we get these emails, I always think there's an ulterior motive, because especially in the ones from this year, there was an underlying issue at the end of all of those emails. And I just felt like, okay, well, I understand your point. However, to end it this way in every single one, it didn't sit well in my stomach.
Thank you, Ms. Maroon. Mr. Marini.
I just want to be clear, this is not a discussion on the performance of the coach. This is a discussion on the behaviors and practices of the board and how we're informed before we're going to vote, and the heads up we're given. So this has nothing to do with the coaches, but you're asking me to approve, not you, I'm being asked to approve the appointments when this is told I have to do it today or we won't have a coach for the fall. So that's the problem. It has nothing to do, I want to say that very clearly, nothing to do with the coaches themselves.
Thank you, Mr. Marini. Mr. Kidd?
I would encourage that, you know, regardless of the outcome of this, of this motion, that I think it would be a good idea to have Mr. Davis perhaps be in, whether it be operations of the Human Resources Committee, to discuss what a good date this would be, or if that would be prudent for Mr. Davis to directly sit in on a committee discussion, or if it's more policy-wise accurate to have him relay information to Dr. Antunes and then have her bring it to the board. Because I think that perhaps, you know, both this along with graduation, many other issues might be good to discuss during this coming year of setting more accurate dates for those, both in terms of when they have to be approved by and when they have to, and when discussion has to begin.
Thank you, Mr. Kidd. Mr. Gillette?
Yeah, so I'm going to agree with Paul on a couple of things that maybe take it slightly further. I would not advocate for, certainly for evaluating coaches as a board member or a board. No, you can't do that. And but I think the board has to feel confident in understanding the evaluation process. I think that's completely reasonable. And I kind of understand. I mean, I know we changed it several years ago, but that doesn't mean that everyone understands it for sure. And I think if this is something that Mr. Oliver asked to learn about through, several years ago we decided this should be something that HR committee does, and that's reasonable too, for them to take this on in their purview. So if it's something that he wanted to understand better, I think that's reasonable. That if we don't feel confident that we understand on the criteria upon which coaches are evaluated each year, recommended, I say, for appointment, then, and I would not ask for to understand any individual coach or assistant coach's evaluation. I wouldn't even want to see that. Just what are some criteria? Are the criteria different in the different sports? What are you looking at exactly? That's all. I mean, and I think that's reasonable for Mr. Oliver to have asked for that. So, thank you.
And I just want to echo those sentiments. This isn't a knock on any one individual coach or any one individual program. The two most disturbing things on this is we didn't have an opportunity to talk about this at HR. We didn't have an HR meeting this month. And secondly, I don't have an answer as to whether or not our new principal has been privy to this. And we're tasking her with a new job at the high school. She's made a commitment to this board that one of the main focuses she has is she wants to look at the athletic program. And we're going to saddle her with coaches for another, we don't even know if she's had input on this. So again, I'm not asking for this to be voted down. I'm just asking for this to be delayed. I would hope the coaches would start their season and understand that it's going to be addressed at the next board meeting. But that's all I'm asking for, is we just defer this until we get some more information.
Mr. Marini?
And I guess
Mr. Pulsifer.
my follow-up comment is I know a month is a long time to wait to figure this out, but we have the ability to schedule another meeting at a sooner time period if we need to vote. We don't have to wait a month.
Thank you, Mr. Marini. Mr. Pulsifer?
I just think we have to be a little bit careful what we ask for, specifically with regards to Principal Fisher. At the time, if she had been given a day to review it after her appointment, it still would have not been able to be voted on until this meeting. So it certainly as we go forward, we should, but I think we should not hang part of our analysis this time on Principal Fisher's ability to have review and input, because there just was no time from her appointment till now for her to have any meaningful review of this. Certainly in time to get it to the days we're talking about we should have voted on this. There's not time enough to have reviewed it for now. So I think we need to certainly be fair in evaluating her piece of this review, because she didn't have the time based on her appointment.
Thank you, Mr. Pulsifer. Ms. Nurse?
I'm not going to repeat what everybody says. I do feel similar about the processes not just involved with the sports, because I asked 11.5 to be separated out for the same reason. We're under a time crunch now and it has to be approved, or we start the process all over again. But to find out that staff input may not have been a part of this process holds me up because I think it's invaluable part of the process. So I think we need to figure out how this doesn't keep happening. I am in agreement with our other board members who are saying that.
Thank you, Ms. Nurse. Any other comments? Mr. Oliver? Okay. So I'd like to weigh in because I did attend the HR committee meeting from March 9th, so I just had a few clarifying questions for Mr. Oliver because I think I understand the sentiment. I've also been a big proponent on process, so Mr. Marini, calendar, big thing. I do understand, I think. So with respect, Mr. Oliver, when you talked about revising the review process with coaches, I feel that, and I don't have the minutes in front of me, but from memory, and perhaps Mr. Pulsifer and Ms. Maroon, I believe you were at those meetings, if you could help me. I do believe Mr. Callahan did walk through detailed coaches' evaluation process. In fact, I think, and again, I don't have the minutes, I believe Mr. Callahan showed us the coaches, like a standard template that was maybe 5 years ago, which was very simplistic, and then he proceeded to show us what the coach's evaluation was that is currently the case, where it had many detailed rubrics, look-fors, and examples of look-fors. Is that your recollection, Ms. Maroon and Mr. Pulsifer?
Yeah, I actually just found my notes from that meeting. I don't have the actual minutes in front of me, but I did find that he did, he mentioned that vacancies are posted at the same time as teachers, 2 weeks minimum, screening interviews by the AD, small committee, building admin, that was like the process. And then he went into the actual eval that even had, and I just wrote bullets, like community, like what's the community outreach? Are they reaching out to the community? How are they in contact with parents, fundraising, events, charity and volunteer work, and younger clinics? All of this is taken into account within the eval. Like their coaching strategies, use of equipment, use of facilities, and everything else that he also went over.
Thank you, Ms. Maroon, and Dr. Antunes has the minutes here, so I think those are consistent. So I guess the question, Mr. Oliver, that I have, because we do, I hear your frustration, so I want to see how at the next HR meeting, perhaps, as you're the chair, I'm not sure, so can I just, real quick? I'm not sure that, I thought at the end of that meeting you were satisfied with the process, and so I'm trying to understand what changed, or because tonight you said revising the review process.
So I could refresh your memory, because I have very
Sure.
specific recollection of this, because we talked, and I'll refresh Lisa's memory on it. We talked about how at Ms. Maroon's school, you have to reapply for your coach's job every year, and you thought that was kind of silly, because you'd been coach for a number of years.
You put in, but even if other people put in, because you've already been grandfathered in.
Right, but it still posts every year to see what other candidates are out there. And we agreed as an HR committee, and I still agree with this today, that if you have a coach who's been out there for a long period of time, some longevity, a successful program, and again, I define successful program by motivation of kids, maybe kids going on to play sports at a higher level into college. We agreed, I think as a committee, that process was probably a little silly. But maybe we should go out there on a more of a proactive basis to see what other coaches are out there, right? For example, maybe, Nick Saban is moving to Hillsborough and he wants to coach football, right? We don't know. He could be moving into town. So obviously he might be a little bit better than what the coach we have currently, just making a statement, but
It goes half of our
possibly.
school budget.
But, I'm just saying, if there's other better talent out there, are we not giving our students a disservice by not having that talent available to us? In the evaluation process, and again, I don't believe there was an example of the evaluation process. I think we were walked through it. I think we asked to see copies. I've never seen copies of it. But it was a standard.
May I interrupt you? Are you asking to see copies of specific coaches?
No. The actual form itself, how we use it. And I think it was a standard teacher's kind of rubric form. And I thought there should be some other items put into it whereby, how do we motivate our students? Are they going on to play in college? Are they getting college scholarship opportunities? Are they helping the students with recruiting efforts? I thought there were some other things, and they were going to take it under consideration, right? And I haven't seen that. I think there was a form that was circulated, and it goes back to Mr. Gillette's tenure. Steve Cohen, I think, had some changes that he wanted to make on a form. I don't know if that's ever been incorporated. So this has been going on for quite some time.
But see, that's what I'm struggling because, I mean, it was definitely on a Google Meet screen, and I didn't copy it, so I don't know exactly what it was, but I remember seeing detailed evaluation. So that's why I'm.
Right. And it was a standard teachers.
No, it was a coach's, so do you guys remember?
Yeah, it said coaches on it, but it wasn't specific, in my opinion, to coaches. I thought it needed some tweaking, so.
Oh, sorry, that's my timer. Excuse me, one moment. Okay. Apologies. That was a reminder for my child's foot. He has a bone stimulator, it was to remind him to do that, but I'll have to remind him when I get home. Thank you, apologies. Where was I? So yes, so Mr. Oliver, so I just was trying to understand, so I hear the things that you're saying with respect to coaches. Mr. Callahan, perhaps at the Monday's HR meeting, if you'd like to add it to the agenda again, to review like what the outstanding items. Because however you vote, you're free to vote however you like tonight, but we want to get to the bottom. Like, we want you to feel comfortable with the process.
I think we still need to talk about it, but again, I mean, the information is out here for everyone to look at. I'm asking for this to be tabled till the August meeting, knowing full well that hopefully some of the coaches will stay on, but, you know, we have a committee of 9, so let the committee of 9 decide.
If you'd like to make a motion?
The motion's on the table.
So you would have to make a motion to table it? or-
I'd ask Mrs. Maroon, who passed the motion, if she's okay with
So we already have a motion and a second, so it has to go to vote.
that, or you can ask Mrs. Maroon if she'd want to table it, should be, she passed it. If not, then we take a vote, and we go from there.
Yeah, I would not like to table it.
So Ms. Maroon declines to table it. So we will now go to
You have
vote.
no other discussion?
Is there any other discussion? Okay, so thank you, Ms. Maroon. Mr. Mahmood, if we could have a roll call on 10.9 on fall coaches.
Sure. Mr. Gillette?
No.
Mr. Kidd?
Yes.
Mr. Marini?
No.
Mrs. Maroon?
Yes.
Mrs. Nurse?
Yes.
Mr. Oliver?
No.
Mr. Pulsifer?
Yes.
Mrs. Stats?
Yes.
And Mrs. Trujillo?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Mr. Mahmood.
The superintendent recommends that the Board of Education approve the operations agenda as follows: 11.1 to 11.6, excluding 11.5. We're separating out 11.5, right? Okay. So the motion to approve monthly bills, the motion to approve monthly financial statement, motion to approve the 2020-2021 transportation routes as bidded, motion to approve the 21-22 transportation renewals, and motion to approve the settlement agreement as listed. Then we'll go back and do 11.1, 11.5, Mr. Mahmood? Okay.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Mr. Mahmood, if we could have a roll call, please.
Surely. Mr. Gillette?
Yes.
Mr. Kidd?
Yes.
Mr. Marini?
Yes.
Mrs. Maroon?
Yes.
Mrs. Nurse?
Yes.
Mr. Oliver?
Yes.
Mr. Pulsifer?
Yes.
Mrs. Stats?
Yes.
And Ms. Trujillo?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Mo-
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, superintendent recommends that the Board of Education approve the operations agenda 11.5. Motion to approve the resolution to purchase IEP and special ed case management software.
Thank you, Dr. Antunes. May I have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr.
Second.
Gillette. Thank you, Mr. Marini. Ms. Nurse?
I just want to say and put on the record that my vote tonight regarding this is solely based on my concern that there was not staff involvement in selection.
Thank you, Ms. Nurse. Any other discussion? Ms. Stats and then Mr. Kidd.
I'll probably vote yes for this, but again, it's like we're held hostage by time, and this has been happening in several other occasions where the people who are directly involved with implementing policy or using like this software or working directly with something or someone are not involved in the decision-making process. And I would like to see, and I've said this phrase so many times, I would like to see going forward more collaboration with those who are directly affected by any kind of decision that's made.
Thank you, Ms. Stats. Mr. Kidd?
I was just curious if there were maybe just, and just, an idea maybe. I have no clue whether or not this is within really precedent in terms of policy that the board or the administration can have over a certain range of decisions that affect staff, that staff are required to have a committee member on for the committees that approve them before they go to the board or they even go to the board committee. Is there any any standard practice on that?
No, there's no standard. When possible, we try to include staff members dependent upon what the situation is and in the past, I believe this has been a committee of teachers and administrators. If I'm recalling correctly, I really think there's so few of them that it was one or the other, like there was very little decision-making here. It was, as I recall, but again, we're going to reach out to Dr. Radwan to get clarification on that.
Oh, well, one other thing then, in the event that we do not approve this tonight, would that mean we would just be continuing to use the existing software, or?
I don't know if we paid for it or not, I'm not sure.
We would, if it wasn't approved, we would have to sign the agreement for the existing software. But we would lose the money that we invested in all the bidding and all that we did initially to get to this point. So we'd have to recast that.
Mr. Marini and then Mr. Gillette.
So question, and this is for Mr. Mahmood. So for this process, how long ago did this start? So could we have had this conversation earlier? So I think I'm back on the conversation of timing here.
So I think that the budget software, the software was originally in Dr. Radmon's budget, I believe, for last year. So it's a new fiscal year. So this was something, I think with COVID and all that stuff, Dr. Radmon was certainly engaged in many different activities. However, there was no lead, so in the budget development process last year, there was a line item that indicated that she would be buying new software. Obviously, that didn't happen. It was an anomaly year for us. And then as we got closer to the end of the year, she realized that, at this point, we're actually moving monies from last year's surplus. We can only do it this year because of COVID, so that's why we extended it. But it went back a year ago when we developed last year's budget, not the one that we just approved, the one prior to that. It was already in there. So this has been sort of almost a year out, and then she realized that, with COVID and everything, that we still have to move forward with this, and she realized that what she had was almost like a Band-Aid approach. So she is worried about the current software and the efficiencies of it. So it goes back a year, maybe longer than that.
Okay. So my follow-up question, and maybe this is to Mr. Gillette. Are we able to, as a procedural board, require that future software purchasing decisions that involve classroom-based software require staff to be part of the decision-making?
No, I don't think that would be reasonable for all those things.
No?
For some of them, it absolutely would.
Or make best efforts, maybe if that's a thing that we can ensure, kind of head this off.
Mr. Gillette?
Yeah, so I don't recall any of us asking Dr. Radwan specifically about whether any of the staff had even seen a brochure about either of the new softwares, let alone evaluated. We didn't ask that question. She spent most of the time telling us about the dissatisfaction the staff had with the current. I think that's what, so I mean, once you get on that track, that they were all dissatisfied with the current software, and these were the only two options out there, they're both about equal, then we just, she's there for quite a while to speak about it. We didn't give it short shrift or anything like that. She was there for a good amount of time, I think about maybe 20 minutes, including Ms. Schwab also explained the bidding process on it. So, I mean, it's our recommendation. We have a lot of first-term board members. I'm going into dangerous territory, I know, but we have a lot of first-term board members, and this doesn't even matter if you're first term. You could be like, 10th term, like Chris, board member, and sometimes you we want to be able to trust each other's committees, especially now. It's the past, many years now, like however it's been, almost 10 years now, since we changed the committee structure so that we're not all seeing each other on different committees. I think it's harder since committees are sort of isolated. It's like I'm on no committees with Lisa. I've never been, So it gets harder to, probably a good thing. But so it's hard just, but I hope that moving forward, we can each have confidence in each other. If I'm reporting to you that this was thorough, this was good, that we should do it. Okay, that's all I'm saying.
Thank you, Mr. Gillette, Mr. Marini, and then Mr. Oliver, and then Ms. Stats.
So I don't think this is a challenge on the other committees affecting this and picking this out. I think the question is more procedural and saying, hey, for these kind of scenarios, you could be on a committee, have a discussion about the software, how great it is, and just not ask the question, hey, was a teacher involved? That doesn't mean that it wasn't a thorough discussion. Doesn't mean that it's the best software that's out there. I think this is more, once again, of a procedural thing of just ensuring the right stakeholders are involved. And maybe for this one, it wouldn't have mattered because it's the only two options available, and I get it. So maybe in this scenario, that's okay. But I think that needs to be considered and discussed and say, hey, for this review of this software, we didn't include teachers because of this, but we're including them here, and we have the adequate stakeholders involved in making this decision. I think that's really where it's at.
Thank you, Mr. Marini. Mr. Oliver?
Yeah. I mean, my biggest concern, again, is I'm going to go to two words, transparency, and collaboration. I can't even talk tonight. As much as Mr. Goodhue has a lot of good things to say when he comes up to the podium, I'm frustrated by the fact that Mr. Goodhue is coming up here and talking about things that his staff and his teachers have not been consulted on and we're implementing. I'm going to go back to detracking. There was a lot of discussion and there was several meetings where Mr. Goodhue and his staff, his officers were talking about maybe a better way to implement it, but we were forced to make a decision without that information. And I'm still extremely uncomfortable about what that decision was. And I don't know if there's a way to go back and recant my vote because I'm not in favor of it. Based on information I'm hearing from experts, from frontline teachers, from retired teachers, from union leaders. And I'm hearing that same thing with this particular case. I keep saying, we're talking as board, we're elected officials, you elected us. But I don't feel like we're being heard, so I'm frustrated.
I'm not even sure, I don't think we had a vote on the detracking.
Yeah, we didn't really vote on it.
We didn't really vote on it, right?
Don't worry, John.
It wasn't a vote. It wasn't-
Which is even more disturbing, I think.
So you can take back your vote.
You can take back.
You can take it back.
Can I rescind my vote, Mr. Almood?
And give back your salary this year.
Ms. Stats, please.
It's when we ask questions or maybe even disagree with what a committee has decided, I don't think it's a matter of trust. It's just that we're coming, not because of good or bad intentions. It wasn't thought to ask, was there any staff member that is going to be using this software, part of this decision. So I just think it's part of our own due diligence to ask questions, maybe even challenge any decision that is made by any committee. Hopefully, I would welcome that for any committee that I'm on by someone on the board that is not on that committee. We vote on these issues as a full board. It's not, I don't think we should necessarily automatically go along with what a committee has decided and, welcome the viewpoints of the entire board.
Thank you, Ms. Stats. Any other comments from the board before we vote? Okay, seeing none, Mr. Mahmood, if we could have a roll call on 11.5.
Surely. Mr. Gillette?
Yes.
Mr. Kidd?
Yes.
Mr. Marini?
Yes.
Mrs. Maru?
Yes.
Mrs. Nurse?
No.
Mr. Oliver?
No.
Mr. Pulsifer?
Yes.
Mrs. Stats?
Yes.
Ms. Trujillo?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Mr. Mahmood. We will now go to comments from the board and public. Any comments from the board? Mr. Gillette.
Yes, so maybe it was a week or two ago, Mr. Oliver maybe texted, did you text me? I don't know, maybe he often texts me about different questions. And he was asking me about, well, a query, I will call it. When we passed a certain, like, we approved a course or something, I won't get into specifically what he said. When was that? What meeting was that? So I said, well, I know how to use the, the internet. I'll try to look that up. I'll just search it in our minutes. Well, here's the thing. I'm not sure the minutes are wholly adequate. And I've had this suspicion for a few years, but it just sort of hit me now within the last week and a half. For agenda, certainly, many of the agenda, like extra items, are links to items. And when the links are backup materials, like a memo from someone, from Dr. Tunis or somebody else explaining, why this item is going to be on the agenda, that's great. And some of the links are to long lists of things that you wouldn't want to necessarily have on the screen, like the bus contracts, whatever, long lists of stuff. But when it comes to the minutes, I'm not sure, is it illegal minutes if it just points to, we vote on things and you can't even see it in the agenda item at all, what we voted on? That it's only points to a link? What if the links become disconnected in the future from that document? I mean, there was no way to, and there's no way to search the documents that are linked. So I wanted to search when we passed a certain course that takes place at the high school that Mr. Arbor was interested in. When did we pass that? I could not find it. You can't search for it because you can't search the backup material. And it's really not backup material. And when we have a vote on something and the minutes say, the board approves unanimously, the course is listed in the link. And that's our minutes. I think there's something wrong about that. We should be able to see easily what we voted on. So I don't know if that's something that could be researched. I'll give Mr. Mahmood some work. He doesn't seem too busy. But is that something, is it something that can be researched, Mr. Mahmood?
I think you're talking about the functionality of board docs. Just for the record, all minutes, as far as all the backup, it's all in the board secretary's office. So at any point, that's looked at by the auditors, we are looked at, that is recorded so that there is nothing that will not be found in the official minute book, and that is audited every year with every attachment.
So attachments are printed out and printed out in an official book?
We're required to have that, yes.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
However, you bring up a good point. I just don't know the functionality of board docs and if the search function and that software itself. But I would think that as a board member or even member of the public, that when you go back, you're able to see those links. I'm just not sure why.
Yes. See the links, but I can't.
I think we have an answer.
We have an answer.
Oh, yeah, there we go.
You can. You can. I'm looking right now at November 26th.
How come I couldn't do it?
Because you can't search it. I agree. You ought to be able to search it. But I'm looking at November 26th, 2018, action addenda, and here's a link, motion to approve resolution. Here's a link to the public content, which is the resolution PDF. The documents are available. I went back to 2014, and they're just PDFs, not links, but they're there. I would agree that searching is annoying or not even existent. But if you had it in the minutes, you could go here to board docs and find the actual link to the document. The document is stored still.
Yeah, yes, I think the right in the front, what do you call it? Not the link, right in the front page, if we're approving 3 courses, why could the names of the courses be right there and not have to click on a link to see them? Because I don't think you could, the document that it's linked to, I don't think it's easily, you can't search within the document that's linked.
Oh, no, absolutely.
You know what I mean?
I would agree, the
I
search is,
I had to try to remember,
The-
I had to go through every single thing, I'm clicking on every time we approve the course, whatever, to click on to open the document, and then I could do Control F, I know that business.
Yeah.
I could find down for the thing.
I would agree searching is not reasonable, but I think there's also a reasonable limit of, some of those attachments are just.
Oh, I understand.
And so there's a limit to what you would want to include there.
Right, so I think
online searchable.
Chris, I think we've answered I answered my own, I mean, you answered the question for me. Legally, we're keeping everything that we have, maybe the search functionality or something on board docs we'll have to look into, and I don't know, maybe we should see better on agendas. I mean, when you print out your agenda, you just like to have an agenda, you'd like to know without, I can't click on paper link, but I guess I can open the computer. I guess I'm old. All right, anyway, I had
You're
enough on
supposed to
that.
live your life on your phone and just
I
tap on
had
everything.
enough. I taught myself.
Thank you, Mr. Gillette. Was there a comment, Mr. Kidd?
Yeah, so I'm just going to use an example from today's agenda. So if we go to like motion 11.6, you will see that there is no link to, say, the settlement agreement there, but it said approved settlement agreement for CST number 501-491 as kept on file in the office of the superintendent. Would there ever be any situation where specifically settlement agreements like that would be provided as a link there, or are there certain issues where, for privacy reasons and just the nature of these contracts, that they're not put there?
So you're not logged in. If you're logged in.
Oh, am I logged in?
Yep.
Oh, all right. Fix that. All right, never mind. My issue.
The public can't always get to those, but
Right.
we can usually get to those.
That's a good question, though, you're right, because there are documents that we see as board members that we need to know to vote on that are not information that's available to the public. And so that's why you do see different content for board members than there is for the public. And those documents typically are never available because, that person's information should still be protected even long after they're out of school. It's still private information to them. It would be protected information.
Wait, okay, I got some energy.
Go ahead, Mr. Gillette.
See, I mean, look, so as far as the transportation routes, okay, why weren't they just a link then? Because it goes for a few pages.
Those are required by the county office that you have to put the routes to the board. It is a requirement. It can't be an attachment.
It can't be an attachment. Okay, so that's what I'm saying. I mean, I think there's a little inconsistency about what can be an attachment. When you approve a whole list of coach appointments tonight, it's just an attachment. It's no longer than all the routes. It was only, I printed it out at home and took a look at it. It was 3 sides.
Right, but Mr. Mahmood said that it was a county requirement
Yeah.
for the transportation routes. Mr.
Yes.
Pulsifer.
Well, I think also because board docs is the source of our printed agendas and also what the public prints, we had discussions, probably in my previous stint on the board, about being more ecologically friendly with our agendas and not having everything get printed all the time. And so by having them as links here, when somebody just goes to print the agenda, they just get a shorter agenda and not burning up as much paper just to see the long list of 300 teachers that we're approving or something like that. So, I mean, there was a conscious decision to not have everything end up in the agenda that we print out, we put on the table over here, or what people would print out at home. So there was a reason behind that. Whether there's an issue in not being able to search that, I would agree it ought to be more searchable, but there was a real decision going on there about why we should put more stuff in attachments and not go through agenda papers over here. They're like this thick for the public to pick up.
Chris remembers when the packets were this thick.
Oh, yeah. So there certainly was a reason to do that, and I think we need to find a happy medium, probably more. To me, the issue is more about the inability to have a reasonable search, not about what shows up in the initial list in the agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Pulsifer. Any other comments from the board before we open it for second public comment? Okay, seeing none, then I would like to now open it up to the public for comments on any item. Okay, seeing none, then I will now close public comments and turn it back to the board with any other comments. Mr. Oliver.
I just wanted to alert the community and the board to some sad news. The patriarch of the Lapani family passed away this morning. Vince was a great addition to the Hillsborough community. Central Jersey Nurseries was started some 51 years ago, even a little longer than Mr. Gillette's been in the community. It's very sad, but Vince was always there to support anything we asked him for. He served, I think, on Township Planning Board and some committees with Mr. Gillette. He will be sorely missed in the community, and I just ask that everyone give the prayers out to his wife Barbara, Sean, Troy, and their sister. May he rest in peace.
Thank you, Mr. Oliver, for sharing that with us. Any other comments from the board? So I do have 2 items that I wanted to share with the public, specifically running for a seat on the board. The filing deadline is next Monday. What's the date? July 23rd, Ms.? 26th, Monday, July 26th, 4 p.m. at the Somerset County Clerk's Office. There is some information at the table over there. I just wanted to quickly read out the main responsibilities of board members, if this is of interest to any people in our community. The Board of Education adopts policies under which the school district operates, oversees the budget, approves curriculum, hires and evaluates the superintendent, represents the public during contract negotiations, and serves as a communications link between the community and the school system. School board members must remember that they have no authority except that which results from participation in decisions of the board during an official meeting, actions, promises of commitments. Actually, no, I don't need to read that part. But basically, this is frequently asked questions, and then you can also find that information at school boards, which is njsba.org. Encourage the community to consider running for a seat on this board. And then the next item that I wanted to share is about the Pioneer Family Success Center, which is it was established by a grant from the Department of Children and Families, which is DCF, a division of Family Community Partnerships, and it's funded. So DCF funds a statewide network of over 57 family success centers as a one-stop shop that provides wraparound resources and supports for families before they find themselves in crisis and also during a crisis. Empower Somerset was proud to be the recipient of the DCF grant to open the very first and only Family Success Center for Somerset County. And I wanted to share that on Thursday, July 29th, 2021, from 6 to 7 p.m., there will be a family fun night that will feature a telling of Penelope the Powerful Parrot. It's an interactive experience that utilizes storytelling, movement, and song to deliver a message of hope and resilience. It's sponsored by Somerset County, New Jersey Hope and Healing, FEMA, and DHS Human Services, and the Pioneer Family Success Center. So hope you'll be able to join, and if are there any further comments? Then I will take a motion to adjourn.
So moved?
Thank you, Ms. Marini. Thank you, Ms. Nurse. All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you very much.